Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast. We have a very, very special guest with us. Susan, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to finally meet you and excited just to have some time to talk with you.
Yes, and we're going to hear all about Susan's story. I'm really looking forward to her sharing. I do want to just read a quick bio just to introduce you to our audience. So just a little bit about Susan. She currently resides in New York City with her dog. How do I pronounce your dog's name?
Calliope.
Calliope. And Calliope is adorable, by the way. Go find Calliope.
We call her Moo. Oh yeah, she does have her own Instagram page.
Yes, Moo. Okay. Moo. And Susan works in the financial sector. Susan rushed into marriage in her early 20s, which dissolved shortly after. Years of dating later, Susan's finally decided that she wants to seriously pursue love and wishes to do it overseas instead of in America, where she believes she hasn't found any success in dating and relationships. She hires a matchmaker, Juan Nino, in Medellin, Colombia, and works with him to find her soulmate there. And Susan is from the TLC show, Match Me Abroad, which is streaming on Max and Discovery Plus. So you can find it there. And I believe at the time of recording this episode, it's on the 6th episode of the season. So we're so lucky to have you. Really excited to dive into our conversation.
Me too.
So let's just start with a question I think that all of us would have, which is, tell us about what led you to this point of taking this leap of faith, this vulnerable leap of going on TV, going to Colombia. Like, give us the backstory of what led up to that.
A lot of wine. No, I'm kidding. So I think there's kind of a strange cutoff here in Manhattan. I don't know if it's so much in different cities, but here in Manhattan, 20s and 30s, a lot of dating, a lot of fun. 40s, people start getting married and moving out of the city, and especially moving out of the city as soon as they have children. Obviously there are people that get married and have children, raise children here. But for the most part, as you climb up the ladder, you either climb out of the city or you move. It's a strange island to be on. So dating is very challenging. I will say anywhere in the United States is challenging dating at 50. Your opportunities are so limited. You have both men and women, we have pasts. We've lived a full life. And so now you're having to compromise on a lot of things that you wouldn't have to have normally compromised at a younger age. People are now most likely at my age divorced. There would be co-parenting involved, children involved. There's a lot of things that make it challenging. And then you throw that in a pressure cooker that is New York City. And so what ends up happening, to avoid dating the married men that live in Connecticut and work in the city and have a pied-à-terre here, it starts to get real sloppy. So you start dating younger. And then that's for myself. I'll speak for myself. That's not sustainable. It would be a rare human being that if I dated 15 years younger than me, that would have the same life experience and I would feel compatible with. Mm-hmm. But that's a tough thing to put yourself into. Yeah. So then you're kind of stuck like, okay, what now? I travel a lot and I find that I don't encounter the need to date younger when, like, I go to Italy a lot. I date phenomenal men in Italy.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have mistresses and they're not married and hiding their children. You know, you know what you're getting into. People are pretty straightforward about, yes, I'm married, or no, I'm not. And there's none of the trying to dig for gold to find out a truth.
I appreciate this so much. And I just want to say that, I actually have some clients that live in New York, and they would back up what you're saying here. So you're not the first person I've heard this from. Are you comfortable if I go backwards just a little bit? Because I know you said you got married in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if after your divorce, did you go through this phase that a lot of women go through where you were like, I'm independent, I don't need anyone, I'm going to focus on me and my career? Like, was there that phase and you kind of found yourself then coming back later and realizing you wanted a partner? I'm just curious, like, how that whole journey was for you.
That's a great question. Actually, I think my answer is very, very common. It's just embarrassing to be forthright about it. Years of therapy. But I come from an Italian background, and that was what was expected of me. And I think also at that time I was unhappy and I wanted a way out. And that was what was expected of me. That was going to appease a lot of situations in my family and my life. And he was the first love I had ever had. We were best friends. It made sense, but I wasn't like, I don't even recall really the wedding planning. That's how checked out I was. And I remember standing at the altar going, God, say no, say no, say no. But knowing, there's 350 people behind me, that I would bring shame upon my family. I just, at that, I felt like the train had left the building and I had to just kind of go through with it. And I know I am not the only person that has been in that situation.
Of course.
And really, I struggled. We were 23 and I struggled. Like, why don't I love him? Why do I not feel like this is what everybody else has? I don't understand this. Not truly understanding the core reason for getting married at that time. And also that was the early 90s. People were still getting married very early. That was an expected age, right? But it wasn't until I think we had been married 2 years that I just, quite proud of myself, said, I'm not happy. And I'm crying myself to sleep every night, praying that, God, please let me wake up and love him. Please let me wake up and just want to kiss him, because that's what I think a marriage is. And I just felt like I was in a sea floating by myself. And so in answer to your question, no, I didn't walk away from that and go, hooray, I'm single. It wasn't that. It was a huge burden. There was shame on my family, shame on his family. Like, it was a heavy thing at 26 to carry. And I went back to college and just tried to build my life without that safety net of the family, because that was gone at that point. So there was repercussions.
Yeah.
And a lot of repercussions with that. And I knew it getting into it. But the risk it was better to take the risk than not. Because thank you for understanding that. It's hard to explain to people that haven't really.
Yeah. And, I just want to say, I think a lot of our listeners can relate. And you had a beautiful metaphor. You said, floating, felt like floating in a sea. by yourself. And that's kind of that feeling of helplessness and what can I do? But when
no direction,
no direction, when you have that data of crying yourself to sleep every night, you know something's wrong. And just, I applaud you in choosing yourself and making that really hard decision at 26. And clearly you are someone that can go after what she wants and listens to herself, being that you were willing to go on the show too. I mean, there's probably multiple times in your life that you've taken, leaps that weren't comfortable. So I applaud you in that. And you have to do that to thrive.
Thank you. It's odd, as if talking to peers that I knew at the time that got married at the same time. I've had not a lot. I don't think a lot of people want to admit it, but they wish they hadn't done it. And at that time, they now have children, so they have to stay in the situation for the children, and then they were trapped. And by the grace of God, I did not have children. And I honestly had that delusional thought, maybe we need to have children. And I know that there are so many women, like, I'm pretty sure that that's what my mom did. I think if we had children, that would save our marriage. And I, by the grace of God, just didn't. So I think that I would have had a different outcome. I don't think I'd be sitting here with you right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's
tough to know.
Yeah, it is tough to know. But I think I've always been a bit of a feral child, kind of roaming the earth on my own, like trying to sort out.
I can relate to that. I did a ton of travel and exploration, and you grew up in small town Montana, and I was going to Spain, like Guatemala, and all these places. And I can relate to that sentiment. Well, you're living up to the show's title. Let's get vulnerable. You're getting vulnerable like 5 minutes in.
Right.
Walk us through. You're 26. You've chosen yourself. You're kind of, being able to get your life together. What happens next in your dating journey and trying to, find a life partner? What happens during that time?
I met the most beautiful man in college, and we dated for several years. Michael and his family were still good gravy. His family is still like my family. They were like my surrogate family at that time. And I learned so much from this guy. He was younger than he still is, but, it was a true relationship with all of its flaws. It wasn't a childhood thing. It was two adults trying to make a go out of it. And it was so foreign to me and so exciting. And yet at the same time, learning what it's like to have supportive parents. Like, his parents really became my parents, and then championing both of us. I didn't know what that was like. It was like having water wings. It was like, wow, this is great. I don't have to drown. We were together off and on for a while. I really dated great men. I really did. Even when I was younger in high school. It wasn't until probably 2008 when the economic crisis hit. And especially being here in New York, it was tough. And couldn't get a job, finances, losing apartments. There's a lot of not just loss of money, loss of hope, frightened, no safety net, but dignity, humility, like everything. It was a horrible, horrible place to be here at that time. Just struggling to tread water. Sorry, a lot of water.
It's okay.
But I met a man that was also in the midst of it, and two broken people do not make a hole. And that was the first time I'd ever really been in an unhealthy relationship. And that was really difficult to remove myself from. It was, I would have moments of clarity, like, wait, whoa, no, this is not right. This is not healthy. You need to go. And as soon as I would, he was the type of person that would, ride on his horse with his flags and his sword and come with me and sweep me off my feet. But it wasn't sustainable. It never was sustainable, but he just didn't want me moving on. They never want you getting healthy, and they never want you moving on, because misery loves company. But it was that was the first time really I dated somebody that was just not a good match. And it took a good almost 10 years. He derailed me. And for some people, you get out of it much quicker. I think what was going on with the economic crisis at the same time, it's just hard to pull yourself out of it.
Yeah.
Some it would take sooner, some it would take longer. Some people never get out of that cycle. But what I found feeling so alone and isolated in this was women just never wanted to talk about it. They had been through it, but just never wanted to talk about it. So what was making me feel so removed was a common thing. And it would have been nice to have had women to rally and support, but it was just something I had to pull myself out of.
Yeah. And you did get out of it.
A lot of therapy. But you know, therapy, I am a huge proponent of it. And I needed to unlearn what I learned in those 10 years. I had to unlearn about how I saw myself, who I thought I was, and rediscover with all the scars this new person, because I'm never going to be the person that I was prior to meeting him. And honestly, do you want to be? No, you always want to grow, but it took a while, but then brought me to a place where I didn't date. I took myself completely out of the dating pool for a couple of years. Yeah. And it was tough, but I really thought I'm not doing myself any service by jumping into another relationship if I don't have my shit together. So
thank you for being vulnerable about this. I really appreciate it, because there are a lot of our listeners who can relate to this kind of relationship, myself included. The thing that inspired me to build this podcast and this brand was surviving a relationship with a narcissist for 1.5 years. And so obviously I relate to you. Yeah. I always tell people it's like this metaphor with the frog jumping in a boiling pot of water. If you knew the pot of water was boiling, you wouldn't have jumped in it. But if you put a frog in room temperature water and you slowly turn the heat up and the water's boiling, and thank God, the frog could jump out like you and I did getting out of those relationships, but you don't know until you're in it. So many women blame themselves for choosing that when it's just not the case. It can really happen to anyone.
Any education level, career level, any city, state. Yeah. And I felt so shamed by other women, and I learned a great lesson. I never associated myself with somebody in an abusive relationship. And when I would hear like my cousins or people I knew that were in really scary situations, well, why don't you just leave? Not even drawing a parallel to my own abuse. Because if let's call a spade, you're with a narcissist, you're in an emotionally abusive relationship where you're constantly gaslit, and it's disorienting, and it's horrible. But I found it very interesting that I just didn't associate. And occasionally I'd have these moments of like lucidity, like, what the hell are you doing? Oh my God. And that's when I would try and leave. But then again, Prince Charming comes back, waving his flag, doing something. He was the kind of guy too. He was very wealthy, so he could do extravagant things,
Yeah. The weekend getaway to Paris or whatever. Yes, I know.
Yeah. But it was never sustainable. And then you were disappointed all over again. And
it's a cycle.
Yeah. But
Susan, I keep derailing you from your story.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. So I do want to fast forward to, so you take a couple years off after this relationship, which sounds like so healthy. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. And then what happens next in your dating life, and take us to present day, to you going on this show. I want to hear.
I have dated a lot of really great guys. Nothing that I felt, it was enjoyable for the time. It was what it was, and some had a longer lifespan than others. But I also think I pumped the brakes on wanting to go in my head, to go to a place of longevity. I have a lot of checks and balances, just out of protection. Am I picky? Yes. But I think all women and all men should be picky. And that just means you know what you want and know who you are. So I don't feel like I haven't found somebody because I'm A, afraid, or B, too picky, or C, not open. It's not those things. Just haven't found anybody to do something, do life with. And I'm okay with that. Moving forward to the show. So my best friend is also named Susan, and we've been childhood friends for years. And she and I go to Europe a lot, and we date the same type of man, just very well-traveled, fascinating, like just really cool, interesting men. They're not a dime a dozen, and we know that. But we had been saying for years, they should do a show of you and I and set us up with dates all throughout Europe. That's where we're going to find our person. So it's always been like an inside joke. So when they approached me about the show, I thought, well, this is a match made in heaven. This is perfect. Colombia wasn't like number one on my list. Initially, it was also during COVID. So it was the availability of certain cities and countries changed every single day based on the pandemic. Initially, they had said Brazil, and I lived in Brazil when I was 15. So I thought, oh, that would be great. And then it changed. And then I found myself in Colombia, and I thought, why not?
I love it.
And if nothing comes of it, nothing comes of it.
What was that like for you, going through the process of, oh my gosh, am I really going to do this? Am I doing it? Like, just tell me about like leading up to it. Were you excited? Did you ever have moments of, oh wow, I can't believe I did this? Like, what was that like for you emotionally?
I'm still going through it.
Yeah.
No, I really am.
Airing, and you must have a lot of emotions you're processing.
Yeah, it's a lot. Shout out to my therapist. I think I would have moments, and I would call my friends and say, okay, I'll take any answer, but is this the dumbest thing I've ever done? And my friends that know me are, no, actually it's not. So you've done far worse. However, you haven't done it, on national television. But,
you gotta love friends that'll be honest with you. That's good.
But they're absolutely correct. Like I have never shied away from things that are unusual or would allow me an experience. And at the very end, that's the way I saw it. Like, I am going to go and I am putting all of my trust in this one person. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And at the end of it, I'll walk home. Well, I'll walk away and come home and hopefully learn something more about myself. So it was a win-win, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And so the premise of the show, you're matched with a matchmaker.
Correct.
Juan Nino, I believe. And what was that like? And what do you think? Personally, I've never experienced it myself. So I'm just curious, like, what was that like? What do you think about matchmaking?
If I can be frank, I was a little disappointed. I think I was expecting Patty Stanger, like somebody that I think I was truly expecting him to dive into who I am, get to know me, and then choose best case for me, that perhaps someone I wouldn't have normally chosen. And I felt, honestly, through the whole thing, it was a struggle with him. I felt like I wasn't being heard. And that's really frustrating for anybody. I would say, I feel this. And he would say, no, you don't. You're this. Which makes me infuriated. So I initially, not to use the word gaslight, but I also went into it trying to curb that emotion because I thought, well, maybe that's the way a matchmaker works. I haven't had any experience other than watching Millionaire Matchmaker occasionally. But, I didn't know what to expect. So I curbed it and I thought,
how challenging, Susan, because it's such a vulnerable thing. You're opening up this part of your life to someone. You're being so trusting. And then for you to not feel heard, that must have been really challenging.
Yeah. And when you watch it, you can even see in my body language when I do the thing that women do. You just acquiesce. And you can see the life run out of my face and just to go,
hard for you to watch now.
Oh, this last episode was brutal for me because it's one thing to have a visceral reaction, remembering what it was like, but then also to whoever gets to watch the physicality of something so visceral. And in my mind, I thought, well, he's the matchmaker. He obviously knows better than I do. But it kind of goes back. There was a lot of parallels. There was a lot going in my head, as you can imagine, from my past relationship.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, as you said that.
How do you then, from a healthy place, for all intents and purposes, my brain and my heart are going, nope, 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 flash, flash. But I did it anyway. And, I went on the dates and it was a great experience. There's not been many blind dates I've ever been on, but they're all around the same. Like, honestly, it's awkward, but the awkward times 10 because now you have a film crew.
Yeah, you have a film crew.
Yeah. But it was more like, again, my takeaway from it is how to fully trust and trust a man in this process of being totally vulnerable and just saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yet still he needs my input.
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing to sort out.
It's funny. I relate to what you're saying in so many levels. I think so many women do, of being in these dynamics with men who are supposed to be making decisions with us. And then it ends up feeling like they're making them for us.
Yeah.
And not having it feel collaborative can be so emotionally painful, and goes back to all kinds of wounds, whether it's your own relationship with your own father or past dating experiences.
No, yeah, that's childhood stuff right there. And was really interesting on Sunday watching just the physicality of me get to the point, and you can see it in my face. Like, I'm either going to burst out into tears out of frustration, like that kind of like, oh, or I'm going to hit you. So it's either one or the other, but either way, I was brought to one of the extremes. And so for me to hold the composure was for me to just say, fine.
So charming. Well, I know what I'm binge watching now. Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome.
So obviously when we do these incredibly vulnerable things, and, you know, this podcast, obviously very different, but when I launched this podcast, I was terrified because I put so much of my life into it. And it's like this very vulnerable thing. And I always think the really vulnerable things we learn from so much, we grow so much. So tell us about, what have you learned about you through doing this show?
Wow. How self-aware I am of I'm aware of my emotional state. I'm aware of how people affect my emotional state. I'm knowledgeable. Like and I'm resolved with so much stuff. Like I've worked so hard. There's so much that comes out of this for me. I'm really, at the end, I'm just really super proud of myself for putting myself in the position, recognizing things that I recognized, and then using the tools that I've been given to resolve any conflict that I experienced when I was there. I think the other interesting thing that I take away, and it's something I really want to start a dialogue about, women that are my age, that are single. The perception is there's a fault. There's something wrong with me. And it's never she chooses to be single or she chooses not to have children. There is something wrong. And it's interesting, the social media response to watching me. It's, I'm at fault. She's too picky. She's this, she's that. And I thought, wow, this is such an antiquated way of thinking, and that we still think this way. Mm-hmm. That was something I really was surprised to acknowledge that was what was happening. And it was happening during filming too. They were looking for the fault instead of looking for what I was looking for.
Is it fair to say you didn't feel like people were on your side even while you were filming?
I think it was just a constant butting heads with the matchmaker. I don't also trying to be an assertive woman in a misogynistic society in South America is probably not going to be an easy thing, you know.
Sure.
A strong woman, and I knew that going into it, but yeah.
You're shattering the paradigm of what a woman is, right? Just by existing.
Right, exactly. And I really, not only am I just proud of myself at the end of all of this, but I realized that I want to talk about this ridiculous trope that we're still carrying about what a woman in her 50s should look like.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like. How do you start a conversation about that? How could you even start to change society's view or change the dialogue about it? Because it's so deep. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you're here today, so that's that's a start.
Step one.
Yeah, just by taking up space and sharing your story, and maybe you need to start a podcast. I guess that's my that's my advice.
Who knows?
Just by connecting and sharing your story. And it's true that it's ingrained, and it's true that there's a lot of men out there who realize that they also benefit when they acknowledge women's power. And I do see that shift. Sure, it's not happening as quickly as we would like, but I think
I agree with you.
Right? Like engaging with those men and just continuing to have more and more conversations. And I think it can really empower everyone when you're open and honest about what you've gone through.
I agree with you. I've been trying to interact with fans and try and understand why they feel the way they do and why they feel a certain way about perhaps maybe I didn't I'll have chemistry with some person, and like, why do you feel that was my fault? I just want to know. Like, I really want to know. I don't want to defend myself. I just like to know, what did you see? Because maybe it is something that I can change. Maybe if it's a tone, or maybe something I said that perhaps would lead people to feel that way. Again, that goes back to being self-aware and being willing to do the work to change. Because if it is my fault, then, or if there is something I'm doing, obviously I'd want to change it.
I love the openness. There's this beautiful balance of openness to feedback and also knowing yourself and being in reality. And what I've learned as I've grown too is that there's really only a few core people that when I ask their opinion, I will take it and I will take it in and I will process it. And if you're not in that circle, your opinion gets to be your opinion, and you may be potentially projecting your own things onto me, right? So
correct.
So I think what a growth area for you to have all these opinions floating around about your love life, and for you to say, what are the ones that I'm actually willing to consider, and what are the ones that I'm not taking in because it's not good for my well-being, right?
Now, that is another huge lesson. I don't think anybody is ever prepared for the army that is people sitting on their sofas with a laptop or a phone. And it's shocking the amount of criticism. It runs the gamut from criticism to applause to vitriol. And so it's just a bizarre, it's surreal. And I've got to be honest too, like, I am so grateful that I have an amazing therapist that I don't think I would be able to have the darts shoot off of me. I also know who I am, and I know who these people are, and
you know that they don't really know. They only see what they saw that was produced. They don't actually know the truth.
Right. And they're dogpiling, and it's fun, and online that's sport. But I can see how some people that get on reality shows that don't have the infrastructure of good friends that will speak out of love and concern, how you could really get lost and find yourself checking in someplace, little resort someplace for a couple of months to hide out and just really get the help you need, because you could go down a rabbit hole real quick.
Oh yeah.
Real quick.
I agree. Thank you for being open about that. This leads me, I have to ask you about this. This is one of my little daydreams that I have. I always think on all these reality TV shows, whether it's Married at First Sight or the show you were on or The Bachelor, I always think they need an on-call psychologist who will go and support the people on the show. And I'm like, sign me up. I will go. I want to be there. I want to support you. Do you have anything like that as you're filming?
Do you know how many people I have said that to? There is a therapist that you have to have excuse me. That was my boss picking in. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There is a therapist that does a full screen for you. I mean, obviously they would have to do that before they would put you in this kind of a situation.
Sure.
And I think I've spoken to him once while I was down there because I couldn't get in touch with my therapist. Just not because there was an emergency, but just I like to be able to, if something's on my mind or my heart and I'm having a hard time processing, I'm used to being able to have that. But to your point, I have said that several times, that there needs to be somebody on set or somebody on call.
Physically there. Yep.
Absolutely. However, I would dare say it's needed as soon as the show launches.
Even
because to my point about you're getting fiery darts coming from armchair warriors that are just cruel for the sake of being cruel for sport. And if you don't have anybody to really work that through, that is going to get, it's going to get embedded. Yeah. And that's a tough muck and mire to crawl out of. I've seen it with some cast members that I feel for them, but the response is from any therapist would be shut your computer. Like, don't read it. But that's easier said than done. You know, it's easier said than done. And especially when we're already as a society on Instagram and on Facebook.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time. So it's hard to kind of get away from it. But yes, I agree. That should be readily available from day of launch.
I love it.
I think a lot of people would benefit.
All right. Anybody listening, if you know any producers, send them my way. This is my dream. I want to go. I don't necessarily need to be on the show, but I just want to be in it and supporting people. I think that would be such a gift, and it's so needed.
Yes. It is very, very needed. Very needed. Hire her.
You're so sweet. Well, Susan, you have just been so vulnerable. I feel like you've shared so much with us. I want to kind of just take it full circle, and you're so passionate about women knowing their worth. I can just feel that from you. It's like, okay, know your worth, know what you want, have your standards. What would be the advice that you have for maybe women who are in a similar place to you and they're looking for love? Like, what would you want them to know?
Oh, be okay either way. I think the love that we should be seeking is ourselves. We have to give ourselves, sorry about that. We have to give ourselves grace. We have to give ourselves grace, really. I think we can't seek a partner if we don't first fully understand who we are and what we need.
Yep.
Sorry, I just had to tell my
You're fine. Work is calling.
I know. But yeah, love yourself, because everything else is easy after that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And if you don't find love, you found yourself, and that's the greatest thing. Travel the rest of your life, do whatever makes you happy. You don't need another person to make you happy.
Yeah.
You need you to make you happy. That's the end. That's the end all be all. End all be all.
Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely in alignment with what I teach. And I talk about how we cannot seek love to fill a void within ourselves. And that really, truly, the love for ourselves brings us so much love in our lives. And we have love of friends and love of family. And we already have so much love in our lives when we really allow love in. That
I agree.
When that romantic partner comes, and let's say you do match up with that person, they act as a multiplier. They simply multiply more love in your life, but they won't bring it to you if you don't already have it. Yeah.
And you're coming from a healthy place. You're not projecting all of this neediness, because you're self-sufficient. And you're right. They're like an accoutrement. They're going to make you a better version of yourself strictly by being with you. You're a value add.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
A value add. Exactly.
And if you don't have a partner, it's not a reflection of a fault. There is no fault.
Yes.
Maybe it's just not your time. You haven't, and the risk in dating for me is it may take a very long time to find that person, but not to settle. Rather, if it doesn't ever come, I know what I'm looking for, and it will be right. It may just take a very long time, or it may not. And just enjoy the process of getting to experience all these different people. Like when you take the optics and the end game off of, I must have a husband, I must have a boyfriend, you miss out on all of the people and the places and the things that like you're clouding all of that with just this myopic view.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being so vulnerable with us. I know the audience is really going to love your story, and I hope that they do tune in to watch it unfold. And we'll obviously be sending you all the support and positive vibes as all the episodes air.
Yeah.
Once again, the show is Match Me Abroad on TLC. It's every Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and you can stream it on Max and Discovery Plus. This has just been such a great interview, Susan, and I'm excited to see what you continue to do as you share your voice and grow. So thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to have gotten to spend some time with you. And I think it's always helpful to hear your story out of your own mouth. Sometimes you forget where you've come and what you've conquered and where you are. So thank you for allowing me to have that walk down memory lane.
Of course. And I always ask this question of my guests. So I'm going to ask you, if you were walking down the street in we'll just say in New York, and a random stranger comes up to you, they're everywhere there. They come up and they say, Susan, I want your best life advice. of the moment. This doesn't have to be like a time, but just
best life advice.
Today, right now, they say, I want your best life advice. What would you share with that person?
Try everything once, but know your limits. I mean, that within reason, but I think fear keeps you from experiencing beautiful things, fear of the unknown. I think putting one foot in front of the other, especially when you are frightened to death, the reward is so great. Just try. Mm-hmm. No doesn't have to be a final no. It's just try it. Attempt it. Try doing a podcast. Just try it.
Just go after it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like that is so evident in who you are as a person, just your openness to experience and your willingness to try and to really embrace life. And I just think, gosh, you would be the funnest person to travel with. Like, I think about, like, you're the person you want, like, you know, in the food market in Thailand, just like, let's try it all. You know what I mean? Like, you have that spirit about you. It's beautiful.
It's, that's the one thing I love about traveling is just, you don't know anybody, so you can make an ass of yourself, and you can, I like being uncomfortable. I think being uncomfortable is I feel safe in being uncomfortable. I know a lot of people don't, but you work through that. And then when you're uncomfortable, you allow things in, you would go to a food market in Thailand and try, what are those, what is that chicken egg? You know what I'm talking about? It's like a half, it's like a week away from hatching, but yet they eat it in the egg.
Goodness. Okay. Well, we'll have to go.
I won't go that far.
You're just so awesome. And thank you so much for sharing your story. And I hope that, obviously love is already with you and that more love is on its way to you. And once again, just thank you for being vulnerable with us.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm tickled. I'm tickled to have been here. Thanks so much.
Love it. Yes. Yes. And everyone, of course, I'm wishing you high self-worth and great relationships. We'll talk to you soon.